Welcome to Not Another Greek History Podcast, the podcast that aims to be exactly what it says. I'm your host, Onouphrios Dovlepis, and together we'll discover the not-so-frequently told stories of Greece's history that will change the way you view things forever. In 2003, a Greek movie was released titled Politiki Kouzina. In English, it had a very different name, A Touch of Spice. The director was Tassos Boulmetis. The movie recounts the story of a boy whose family is forced to leave the city in 1964. That was the final blow to the Greeks of the city. And now we'll get to the name of the city. In Greece, we refer to Constantinople simply as the city, which is the word polis. City is the word polis, hence the name of the movie also, Politiki Kouzina, cuisine obviously, Politiki, which means of Constantinople, but at the same time, it's a wordplay with the word political, which is the same word in Greek. Politiki, for the city, and political is the same word. So from the Greek phrase Istimbolin, which means in or to the city, Istimbolin, comes the supposed Turkish name Istanbul. But I don't use this because practically this is what Turkey imposed on the English language, that you should call the city Istanbul because they renamed it officially roughly a century ago to supposedly make it sound more Turkish, because now it's part of the Republic of Turkey. But they went, actually, I'm not sure if they realized it or whatever, they went much, much closer to the Greek language, because keep in mind, Constantinople is half Latin. It's named after the Emperor Constantine, who made Christianity official. So Constantine is a Latin name, but the word polis is Greek. But the phrase Istimbolin is entirely Greek, so Istanbul is entirely Greek as a name. So the boy's family is forced to move to Greece, to leave the city, because his father wouldn't just convert to Islam and get it over with. The most powerful moment of the film is when the father tells the story about when the Turkish officials asked him to convert, because keep in mind, they didn't want to move. No one would want to leave their city, obviously. It happened to me as well when my parents made me leave Thessaloniki, where I was born and lived up to the age of 10. But I never wanted to move to Athens. I never wanted to leave Thessaloniki. Of course, who would ever want to leave their home city? So it's the moment when he says, these were the hardest seconds of my life, and I still feel guilty because for a couple of seconds, I even considered becoming a Muslim. Keep in mind, Christianity is a really important thing for the Greeks, especially as we go further back in time. Imagine in the 50s, in the 60s, what that would have meant for those people. It was so important that he even, in the end, chose Christianity over staying in the city that he loved. And he says, they wanted me to convert to Islam. Me, not you, only me. Only the father of the family. He didn't do that. And it's actually, this is the director's story. It's a true story. The film won 8 state film awards. It broke every record in the Greek box office with roughly 1.5 million tickets, because in Greece we don't measure the movie's success in money. We only talk about tickets. It remains to this day the most successful Greek movie ever, and is still famous for its iconic music.
Δεν θα λυτρωθείς αν γυρίζεις στα λιμέρια της πληγής, τα ντουμάνια στο τρένου τις γραμμές σου δείχνουνε το χθες. Θες δεν θες στα λιμάνια των φάρων οι ρηπές ανάψανε φωτιές, αχ μην κλαις.
1964, Turkey carried out a plan of expelling all the Greeks through harsh economic measures, like the family of the director that I told you about, by confiscating their property and banning the Greek language in public. Anyone caught speaking Greek would have been seen as a spy. The local newspapers even published lists of Greeks that were considered an enemy of the state, and those people had to leave Turkey within 24 hours. Of course, those enemies were taken to officials where they prepared a criminal record for them and forced them to admit to whatever they charged them with. Otherwise, they were imprisoned. Turkey deported over 40,000 Greeks who were only allowed to have with them up to 2 pieces of luggage of about 20 kilos max. That would be like 44 pounds. And about $20 cash. Think about the madness behind this. The distractions that I mentioned earlier were mainly in stores and in factories because the Greek community, not all of it obviously, but many of them were merchants. These were mainly rich people whose lives were being destroyed with all of this. And in the end, they could only have with them $20 in cash. At the same time, Turkey planned to exterminate the Greeks of the Greek islands of Imbros and Tenedos. Imbros and Tenedos had been ceded to Turkey under the Lausanne Treaty of 1923, which involved the exchange of 1.5 million Greeks from the Ottoman Empire to Greece and 500,000 Turks to Turkey. 500,000 Muslims practically to Turkey. It was based on that. It was based on religion. That's how eventually Greece, Turkey, let's say as well, but especially Greece, becomes more homogeneous when it comes to religion, especially. Back then, 92% of the island's total population would have been Greeks, with 12 schools and over 1,900 students, which now is about from 92%, okay? It's about 1% with 1 school and 10 students. That plan, as you can see, really, really worked. By doing this, though, Turkey violated the Lausanne Treaty because the treaty itself included this whole thing that some Greeks would stay in Constantinople and we would keep also some Muslims in northern Greece. But those minorities would have to be protected. Whereas, as we can see, Turkey really tried to exterminate them completely. They almost did it. In 2021, Netflix aired a Turkish TV series called Kulüp in Turkish, The Club in English, about a nightclub in the city in the 1950s. What do you know? It's happening at the same time. It's about that time. The series shows the anti-Greek sentiment of the era, which is quite interesting that they show that. And in the last episode, they also depicted the pogrom. By the way, I had mentioned in the episodes about Cyprus that this year, in 2024, there is a Greek TV show which has to do with the invasion of Cyprus, which is called Famagusta. And it shows, of course, the life of the family in modern-day Cyprus, but of course, at the same time, it shows a lot of the stories of what happened to the people during the invasion in 1974, with people that were lost and were never found, with many women that were raped, with people who lost their children and then they were raised as Turks, and so on and so on. And I said, I hope that this goes on Netflix at some point. Lo and behold, a few days ago, it became known that Famagusta will be on Netflix. But over the past few days, Turkey announced that they managed to stop Netflix from broadcasting Famagusta outside of Greece and Cyprus. And to be honest, I'm not really sure about this yet, because that I know, up to now, which now is about September 10th, I'm not sure if there has been an announcement by the creators of the TV show itself in Greece. So I am not sure whether that is true or not. But if that is true, That is creating a really, really dangerous precedent, as you can imagine, because Turkey is trying to stop a historical, practically, it's fiction, but at the same time it's historical, TV series, which shows bad things that Turkey has done. And if that really happens, it means Turkey is using Netflix for propaganda, because Turkey is calling what the TV show shows that is the propaganda. And if Netflix gives into that, that is something really, really disturbing, really alarming. And we'll see how that goes from now on. But just so you know, that has happened. It might be true, or it could be that Turkey is just spreading fake news about this. Or maybe, who knows, the TV show was never supposed to be broadcast outside of Greece and Cyprus, and it was just meant to go on Netflix just for Greece and Cyprus. But we don't know yet, anyway. The word pogrom comes from Russian to describe the 19th and 20th century attacks on Jews within the Russian Empire. The 1955 Istanbul pogrom is another dark page in the history of Turkey, and yet another painful one in the history of Greece. Greece's efforts to bring attention to the matter through international organizations such as the United Nations and NATO, of course, was met with indifference. Who reacted against that? The British and the Americans. Who would have thought, right? Unfortunately, the British and the Americans in NATO said that it was undesirable to investigate the pogrom, while other fellow Europeans, such as the French, the Belgians, and the Norwegians, like out of the blue, Belgium and Norway, especially, this is so random, they told the Greeks to let bygones be bygones. So nice of them. Thank you for that. Throughout time, Turkey has had a very hostile attitude towards Greece, unfortunately. Recently, Erdogan, that I mentioned earlier, who called the pogrom a fascist policy, he made a mosque of the Orthodox Hora Monastery, and the Hagia Sophia Church, both in Constantinople, just to spite the Greeks. Obviously, only we would care about these churches being converted into mosques. So this is definitely a move to, let's say, irritate the Greeks. Not even UNESCO cared. Keep in mind, Hagia Sophia, as you say, Hagia Sophia is a UNESCO site. And of course they wouldn't care because it's practically in the regulations of UNESCO that a change of status made in a World Heritage Site does not contradict the UNESCO Convention. The 6th century Hagia Sophia Church is Turkey's most visited tourist attraction, and it's a huge symbol for the Orthodox Christians in general, but especially for the Greeks, as I told you. And it worked as a museum from 1935 up to 2020, so up to 4 years ago. That's when it became a mosque. The Hora Monastery, by the way, was my thesis when I studied history and archaeology, because I did a lot of Byzantine and so Christian archaeology. Well, at least I got to see it before it was converted into a mosque, and it was still a site to be visited, and you could see all the mosaics and all that stuff. The Turks' answers now to all of this was Hora Mosque, like Hagia Sophia Grand Mosque and other cultural assets on our lands, belongs to Turkey, and it is our property. And it is true, they're right about this. It is theirs now. Then they said some more funny stuff, to be honest, about tolerance, respect, and human rights, and that Greece has no right to lecture Turkey because we are the ones, Greece is the one suppressing minorities. Yeah, okay. I guess we were the ones that did the pogroms, and we reduced the population of the islands from 92% to 1%. But okay, Greece is the one suppressing the minorities. Turkish governments promote, unfortunately, the agenda of the Blue Homeland, as they call it, which threatens half of the Aegean Sea and several large Greek islands, because Turkey wants, of course, petroleum and natural gas deposits, which would be in the Aegean Sea. But, as we mentioned earlier, the 1923 Treaty of Lausanne ceded to Greece all the Aegean islands that were beyond 3 miles from the shores of Turkey, with the exception of Imbros and Tenedos, the 2 islands that I mentioned earlier, which now have maybe about 10 students. But what do you know? Those were the 2 islands where the population was eventually almost eliminated. What a coincidence. The only 2 that were given to them, they tried to exterminate the Greeks. Exterminate, not in the sense that they killed them. In this case, with measures that were taken, eventually the population was reduced. Unfortunately, Turkey's ambitions regarding taking over parts of Greece, such as the Aegean Sea and islands and all that, are backed by the United States and England. Just listen to the episodes about the Turkish invasion in Cyprus that I told you will be in the description, and you'll see exactly what that means. The USA helped disarm Cyprus back then to facilitate the Turkish invasion, and even now, NATO leaders tried to convince Greece to disarm and send its defensive weapons to Ukraine. This is what Evangelos Valianatos writes, who is a Greek college professor and author. Last but not least, a lot of this episode's information, just to be really clear about this, and just so you know where all of this is coming from, it doesn't just come from Greek sources. Obviously, some sources are Greek, but it comes mainly from British and Turkish sources. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share. Until next time, this is Onoufiros Dovletis signing off from Not Another Greek History Podcast.